Yeah, hi, it's Luke Cataruzza with another great interview at Living Your Satisfying Life. As you may know, the purpose of this podcast is to feature ordinary people who, after their personal transformative experience, have the ability to change the course of their life. What is that provides that clarity from knowing to actually experiencing how to have a satisfying life? Today's guest is Anastasia Westlake Muller, and while she was in the dentist chair, a complication occurred, and a profound near-death experience led her on a journey that was quite unique. From the ceiling, looking down at herself, to becoming aware that she was much more than her body and mind, as she described it, part of the all-knowing she called soul, and as many others describe it, as the universal consciousness. Dr. Eva Ritvo digs deep into the Anastasia's experience and provides an insightful human conclusion that we indeed may be entering a time where science will realize that the unknown lies in the experience of those that have had that transformative awareness. And now here is Dr. Eva Ritvo.
Good morning, Anastasia. It's nice to see you.
You too. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. I know from meeting you in the past, you've had some very interesting experiences in your life. One in particular that was quite transformative. Can you share with our audience a little bit about that experience?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So you're referring to a NDE, or a near-death experience, as they're called, that I had back in 2019. And this experience is definitely one that has transformed my life from the point of it happening and to today. And I would suspect, because of how profound it was, I'm going to be experiencing transformation for the rest of my life because of it. But essentially what happened is I was in the dentist office. I was getting a procedure done, and I was getting some treatments that I had never received before. And I had some sort of reaction where, as I was receiving this nitrous oxide or gas to help with the procedure, my body started to respond in a very unusual way. And because I had never had this type of treatment done before, I'd never experienced any of these types of medications that were used for it, I didn't know if what I was experiencing was something that was normal or if it was something that I should speak up about. But essentially, it felt like every time I would breathe, I felt like my body was rising above and then falling back down into the chair. And this happened a number of times, and it finally reached a point to where it felt like with one breath, I just hovered way over my body and fell back down and thought, I should probably say something at this point. And the next thing that I know, I am no longer in my body. I am in the ceiling of the dentist room looking down at my body. And from this point on, I tell my story as if it's one thing after another, but there was really no sense of time at this point. I didn't have a feeling that there was a now and then a later. And so from my perspective, it's as if everything happened all at once. But the immediate realization, and the one that I would say has really played the most significant role in how I view my life now, as a soul in a physical body, is this understanding that when I looked down at my body that was in the chair, I said, what am I doing up here? And this epiphany hit me. It was like a light bulb that went off. And I realized that I said, what am I doing up here? As in this part of me that wasn't my physical body that I identified with. I didn't say, what am I doing down there, where my physical body was, which is the part of us that we often identify with, is our physical body, is who we are. And I realized we are not our physical bodies. And my very next thought that I can remember having is, am I dead? And with that thought, I flipped upside down, and I was no longer looking down at my body that was in the chair, but I was now looking up at the ceiling. And I was so close to the ceiling. It was as if I was maybe an inch or two at the most away. And because I was so close to it, everything was blown up. Everything seemed like the dust, the cracks, the crevices, the texture of the ceiling was all amplified. And I was taken back by this awe, this feeling of just this absolute beauty that struck me from something like a ceiling. Really pretty insignificant as we would relate to it in our lives day to day. But in that place, in that time, there was this childlike wonder that I felt for this visual that just seemed so miraculous to me. And with that awe and wonder setting in, I left the room. I like to say I blinked or an aperture closed, and I was no longer in the dentist office. And when I opened my eyes, or when the aperture opened, I was in this place that was just absolute bliss. It was peace. It was unending comfort and love. It was a place that I call it the void because where I was dark. But that word tends to come with some negative connotations. We tend to associate things that are lacking as something negative or something bad. And in this place, although I call it the void, it was anything but. It was completion, and it was as if it was a void of anything not complete. And here there was this understanding that everything that we are outside of our physical body is 100% completely connected. All of us are together as one. And because of that knowing that I had in this place, I have started calling this experience of a void the oneness, because it felt as if that's the place where all of our soul connections existed, all of our experiences that, as we relate to time, that have ever had happened or ever will happen, all existed there. It was a place of all knowing, and it was a place of absolute potential. And so, in this understanding, it felt like this awareness of knowing was expanding infinitely. And it was a sensation of as if I was expanding into this knowing. And at one point, sometime a few months ago, I was giving a live talk, and somebody had asked me, how was it that I experienced this knowing? And it was a fantastic question because I had never really put it into words, because my awareness was of myself individually. But as I expanded into this infinite, all knowing oneness, it was as if I still had a sense of individuality, but my awareness was expanding away from that. And my own personal identity became far less important, became almost inconsequential as I became part of this infinite, all knowing oneness. And this place it's without words that we don't have words to describe it. We have nothing that I at least have ever experienced in this world that even come close to the completion that I felt in this oneness. Now, I'm a mom and I'm a pet owner, and so I have had all of these experiences in my physical life that we would often relate to as the most profound unconditional love you could imagine having. And I love my children beyond words. I love my pets. I love my family, my husband. There's still a limitation to the human love compared to the infinite, all-knowing completion that is who we are outside of our physical body. And so as I'm expanding, there's this sense that it's as if I could access anything that I wanted to know, but I couldn't form a question. And this part is just so interesting. And I feel like in terms of like philosophies or tools to bring back to here and apply to our day-to-day life, this is the one thing that really helps me kind of navigate staying in my soul self versus my human self. And that is curiosity. I couldn't ask a question there. All I could do was be curious. And through curiosity, the wondering, I could bring the answer as a knowing into my experience. And I use the word knowing versus understanding a little bit differently, because understanding is something that we tend to say or refer to as a process of like intellect. We learn something, we integrate that learning into other things that we have understood so that we can kind of grasp something better than we had before. And that process can take time. We could have to be exposed to something dozens, hundreds of times before we truly understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing, on the other hand, is instantaneous. It's just this part, it becomes a part of us. And so when something becomes a part of us, we don't have to be exposed to it multiple times because we know it. And that knowing in the place that I was at was instantaneous. There was no process of learning or understanding. It was instant knowing about anything that I was curious about. And I felt myself wanting to be curious about everything and wanting to expand as quickly as possible. It's like I was wanting to like slip through pages of a book, you know, that you're just learning something instantly because the knowing is instant. And the next thing I know, I'm back in my physical body. And at this point, I'm holding on, and I feel this aperture of where I was beginning to close and becoming more grounded and present into my physical body and not in this place of the oneness that I was just at. And as I settled into my body, the dentist was there, was looking very concerned. I don't know what happened in those moments. I don't know if I was gone for 10 seconds or a minute. I don't know how long the dentist was aware of anything. All I was concerned about was staying in this place of oneness. I wanted to go back to this void. And I remember grappling to try to hold on to all of this knowing that I had just connected with, but I couldn't. It was as if it was departing with this aperture. It was slipping through my fingers like the sand. But the one thing that I came back that I could hold on to that didn't slip away was this understanding about why we are in a physical body. And this understanding is, it's not, horribly complex. It's not, scientific. It's not quantum physics. It's nothing that fancy. But very simply, I came back with this understanding that we are in a physical body because our physical body is like a sensory tool. And that as a sensory tool, it is able to collect all of the sensory information about the physical world. And that through that connection and through that part of us that is more than our physical body, we are able to send that information to the soul level and to this oneness, to this all-knowing. This is the pool of understanding of where and who and what we can do as physical bodies, as physical beings. And that there is absolutely no getting this life wrong. That our purpose as a soul, and I say that as of right now, our purpose as a soul in a physical body is to experience what it is like to have a physical experience, to be a soul having a physical experience through this vessel, this body that has all of this sensory capability, and to be able to experience those sensory capabilities in a direct physical way. And because that understanding was so clear, so complete, the knowing was without question for me, because it was a part, that knowing was a part of me when I came back. I have, for the most part, come to this place to where any fear that I may have had going into this, any type of belief systems, whether they be religious in nature, cultural in nature, about what it means to live a life that is right or wrong or good or bad, or the fact that we're here to learn lessons, that has all been wiped away. We are not here to learn lessons. Now, our physical bodies are evolving over time to learn what it is like to be a better vehicle, a more efficient vehicle, if you will, for the soul to have a direct physical experience. But that doesn't mean that we're here to learn a lesson so that we can pass or fail. So that way, when we pass on into the next life, we either get the heaven or the hell or the good or the bad experience. We don't have this sorting type of outcome from the physical life. And it's a really important distinction because it flipped the script for me personally. It used to be that I lived my physical life in such a way that I was always trying to do the right thing, to be good enough, if you will, to be able to give my soul value after I passed on at some point in this physical life. When in reality, the script is the other way around. It's all about living our physical lives in such a way that we allow more of the soul aspect of ourselves in to give our physical experience value. Because our souls are already infinitely valuable. There is nothing that we can do to make our soul less valuable. There's nothing that we can do to diminish or eradicate a soul, if you will. Every single one of us are absolutely integral to this greater oneness, to this completeness, because without it, that oneness could not exist.
So how do you understand that there are people in human bodies that are doing things that are harming other people in human bodies?
So the way I can explain it, using metaphors or analogies, would be as if the physical body is learning through a process of, these are the things to seek that are pleasurable, and these are the things to avoid that are risky. And the physical body is somewhat binary in nature because of that. And so somebody can experience a very hurtful or traumatic thing, and through their interpretation of that experience, either put up defenses or conduct themselves in such a way that will try to prevent that experience from ever happening to them again. And taken to the extreme, that can mean that people become very aggressive, hateful, because it's their defense mechanism at some level within their own biology to keep them safe. And I say that very cautiously because I definitely don't want to give the sense that there's justification for the horrors that happen in this world. We all play a role in helping each other as a collective to become better citizens of our soul. These physical bodies, these vehicles are gifts that we get to have this physical experience with. And because we are all one, we have the opportunity to help evolve our entire collective species out of harm, out of hate, out of pain, out of trauma, out of hurtful actions. And it seems like it's a fairly large statement to say that, but I feel that is where we are heading as a physical species, that we have the capacity to bring more individually. We each have the capacity to connect more and more to that soul part of ourselves. Because when we connect to that, it is impossible to hurt or want to hurt somebody else, because the soul doesn't understand that. The soul doesn't live that way. There is not fear and hurt and desire for pain at the soul level. That's the physical biology, if you will, working to either protect itself or to seek something that feels rewarding.
It's a little hard to understand all of this. It's interesting you got this so quickly.
But that's the difference between understanding and knowing. And so in this place, because the knowing was instant, it wasn't a matter of having to understand it or learn it over a period of time. It was just a matter of knowing. And there was this sense that I had that there was a lot of things that I knew as I was expanding into this oneness, but I wasn't able to bring it back. The knowing at that point wasn't a knowing that I could bring back into my own physical brain. The amount of knowing and understanding and learning and information in this oneness or void is so vast. I feel like I could spend millennia and basically read like one page of an infinite book. It was just so big. And in some respects, when I think about that kind of context, right, I have this sort of scale that has changed for me, where before my understanding was it's me and my physical body, my physical life, this is it, right? And then the people that I'm connected with, and to a certain extent, we understand, you know, we live on a globe that has billions of people, and there's a solar system and a galaxy, and, you know, we kind of understand that, but only from this limited physical perspective. In that experience, it was as if I was experiencing infinite number of our total universes all at the same time. And so the scale of my understanding of who we are, of what we are a part of, it means that both in terms of my physical life, the getting it wrong part or getting it right is, it's like a grain of sand, really. I mean, our physical lives in that scale, it's a blink of an eye. It's so fast. And yet at the same time, because of that, it also undoes any type of shackles that getting this wrong has, like these infinite consequences for myself because of the beliefs and the understanding that I had going into that experience. It took those negative beliefs away, that judgment, the self-judgment away. Another way to explain it that is, it's not the best metaphor, so I always try to avoid this one and hope that maybe I could come up with something better on the spot, and I never do, but this is the best way I could explain it. It's as if our cars are vehicles. They're self-driving vehicles, right? And so you think about any type of autonomous type of technology that's out there today for a car, and you can get into a car that's self-driving, you know, put in your destination and whoop, off it goes. And through the series of learning that it has had, it understands obstacles to avoid. It knows which routes to go that seem most efficient. But it is limited to only knowing what it's been exposed to. It wouldn't know how to, like if you took that same self-driving car to Mars, it would have no clue how to get to any destinations because it's never been exposed to that. It has no context of learning at all. So it's not until it can be exposed to it that it can learn it and understand it. That's our physical bodies. The physical part of us, not the soul part, but the physical part of us can only know what it's been exposed to. It can only know its experiences, things that you read or learn in a classroom, things that you're told, and the beliefs that you form. Those are all physical attributes of our experience. The soul part of us, though, is the part that's infinitely knowledgeable. It's the part that's connected to that all-knowing oneness. It is the part that knows our higher purpose, the reason why we're in a physical body to begin with. Our physical body, as a self-driving car, doesn't realize that there's a soul in the driver's seat. It's just wanting to kind of drive around and do its thing based off of everything that it's learned. So it's when the car, the self-driving car, again in this analogy, and I know it's bad, I'm so sorry.
I like it. I like it. I think it's good.
It's when this car understands that there is a soul in the driver's seat, that the soul can then begin to influence and help navigate where this vehicle of a body goes and what it does based off of the soul's all-knowing infinite wisdom, not based off of the limited knowing that the vehicle, the car, has from its own experiences.
I like it. So what you're saying is prior to your near-death experience, you were like a self-driving car going around based on your knowledge and experiences. Then during that near-death experience, you tapped into a different space, source, paradigm, whatever you want to call it. And since then, your belief system has shifted considerably.
Yeah, it would be like before my NDE, my self-driving car was on autopilot.
Right.
And it only had the destinations that, I was told were important as a child or as a person who lives in, the country of America, who has,
Right.
certain cultural influences. That's all that I knew was important.
Right.
But the soul has a much larger agenda than getting up in the morning and going to a corporate job and coming home and doing it again the next day.
Uh-huh. So what would you say you discovered to be your soul's agenda after this experience? And how did that shift your day-to-day life?
So this one's a little bit tricky because what I felt when I came back was that collectively as a oneness, or as all of us as individual souls, that we are in a physical body because we are here to experience a physical existence. That at the most foundational, fundamental aspect, that, and this is why it's a little bit tricky to say this, because we are in a point in our human evolution where there is suffering. And so we do need to have a way to evolve our physical biology to get to that ultimate purpose of us experiencing the joy and the bliss of our souls in this physical body. But
Anastasia, I appreciate you sharing that metaphor. I think that was incredibly helpful. And I know one of the things you said was from that place, there was no judgment. A lot of people actually aren't really clear on the fact that we might have a human body and a soul, and that those are actually separate things. Can you speak to that? Is that something you were aware of before your near-death experience, or something you only learned through your near-death experience?
So I think I had an understanding going into my near-death experience. And again, using the distinction between understanding and knowing in this particular situation, I think is really important, because my understanding was what I was taught through religion, taught through culture, taught through my own personal curiosity at that time, as far as we had something more to us, that there was a beyond this physical life experience that we would all have, but nobody knew what it was. And after my experience, because I was connected to this knowing, I definitely, and the fact that I had this epiphany over my body when I was looking down, and I went, we are so much, we're more than our physical bodies. And who I identified with, in fact, wasn't my physical body at all. It was, we use the term soul, I think, because we still have a fairly limited vocabulary and understanding of this part of us that isn't physical. But I use the soul as a representation of that we are a soul beyond the physical body. And the knowingness that I have is different than the understanding, because I did experience it directly. I had a connection with an experience that is beyond anything that I had ever experienced in my physical life, and beyond anything that I could even find words to describe. And coming back, having listened to hundreds of near-death experience stories after mine, because, I was on a search, I was on a quest to understand what I experienced, what happened to me, to be able to put it in context. And I would say that I have not found anybody yet that has sufficiently explained in a way the experience of being on the other side, and that experience of love, and I say love, it's profound love. It's a completion. It's love that represents that there is nothing lacking in any of us at that level. We are absolutely complete at the soul. And that completion is what we're looking to bring into the physical body so that we can experience that through all of these great sensory tools we have as a physical body, that we can experience that completion in a physical existence. And so I think you're right. I think unless you've had at this point in time in our biology and evolution and our understanding as a society, as a species, it is really hard to convey to somebody who hasn't had that experience. Yeah, in fact, we are more than a physical body. And I think it's naive even, for someone like me that has had it, and I know through and through, every cell of my body knows that we are more than this physical body. But it would be naive of me to assume that just because I'm telling you that that means that you're going to experience it and that you're going to know it.
Right.
Unless you've had the direct experience. The best that anybody, I think, can do at this point is understand it like any other, information that's provided about why we're here in our existence and what it means to be physical in a physical body.
One of the things that's popular right now, as you know, is psychedelics. And your experience was drug induced, it sounds like. Have you spoken with people who've had journeys similar to yours without the death part, but through using psychedelics?
I haven't spoken with anybody directly. I've heard some short stories on different videos that I've run across as I was looking to better understand my own experience. The piece that, at least from the limited knowledge that I have of other people's experiences, and I've never experienced psychedelics myself, so I don't have anything to directly compare it to. The piece that I would say that stands out that is different is the journey into a different world, reality realm, being outside of this physical existence. I have heard stories where people have felt connected to, everything around them. They felt connected to nature. They felt connected to the people that were in their experience. And I've even heard some stories where people have talked about having an understanding, like an intrinsic understanding of existence. But I have not heard, and maybe they're out there, but I don't actively pursue stories about psychedelics. So I'd have to say my understanding is fairly limited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did the dentist corroborate your story that he was fearful of your life?
I did not go back and have a conversation with the dentist after that. And it leads me to believe that what I experienced was either outside of his awareness at the time because he was prepping, and short enough in duration that it didn't appear that there was, any medical emergency required.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed to me that because I had no concept of time, it was impossible for me to know if it was minutes or seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And from my understanding of others that have had near-death experiences, there's some that have been out for 30 seconds and they have felt like they've lived weeks, years, months on another experience. Mm-hmm. So there does seem to be some I don't know, misalignment, or if you will, with time as it relates to our physical experience and then what we experience outside of a physical body. Mm-hmm. Now, I will say this, I've been really trying to actively find a way to describe why there is no time or how there is no time in a way that we can relate to in a physical experience. And the best example that I've been able to come up with so far is if you were to recall memories, mm-hmm. if you were to personally go back in time through your own experience, you would recall those memories. And now a part of you knows in your own story, in your own timeline, when those experiences happened. Mm-hmm. But when you're recalling them, you're recalling something from 10, 20 years ago in this moment outside of time.
Mhm.
There is no time involved with that because it's a recall, if you will. And all of those memories that you have, they can all coexist at once. You can recall them all and kind of layer one on the other. And you could even blend them together if you wanted to. That's the power of being able to reflect back. Likewise, you can envision future. You can create visualization exercises. You can do things mentally that, again, are not bound by time. You can imagine life 100 years from now, and you can do that without actually having to live 100 years to get there. And so all of these different knowings that you create is the closest that I've been able to come to describe what it is like to have all of that knowing together outside of time.
It's nice. Mhm. Yeah. So how has your life changed since you had this experience?
Well, like I had mentioned a little bit earlier, the biggest change for me on a fundamental level is eradicating any type of fear around a belief system that I need to live my life a certain way, that I need to check boxes, that I have certain lessons that I am just bound to have to learn because, that somehow is going to evolve my soul. My soul's already absolutely complete.
Mm.
All of my experiences here are to give me the opportunity to bring more of that love and bliss into my physical experience.
I
And one
love
of
that.
the most important things that I discovered is how we maintain our physical vehicle. The
Mm.
ability to bring in that soul experience is, it's kind of like if you were to crack open the door just a little bit to your soul.
Mhm.
And you can do that through the tools that we know of today: meditation, walking meditation, exercise, hypnotherapy. I mean, there's a lot of different tools that we know of today. If you can crack open the door just a little bit and then begin to rely on the flow that happens once you connect to that part of yourself, it's as if that flow kind of kicks the door open all the way for you. And when you do that, some people call it intuition.
Mhm.
Some people call it, believing in a higher power, divine plan. There's so many different words we have for it. But when you can live by that,
Mm.
then it's as if your soul is in the driver's seat, guiding you to the experiences that are ultimately going to reflect those aspects of our soul: peace, love, unconditional love, expansive love, and that is available for everybody. And one of the tools that, and I don't want to get into like all the details of the timing and how I kind of came to this conclusion, but through a few different experiences, I discovered that energy healing is one of the prominent tools that helps us kind of crack open that door enough. And if we continue to work with it, we can open the door more and more and more. I'm not a scientist. I don't understand the whys or the hows of it, but I do know, because I've witnessed it both for myself as well as for the people that I've seen transformed by it, that there is a part of when one person has that connection and can share that connection in an unspoken way with somebody else, it helps that other person establish a connection, which then that's the cracking of the door. And as long as they're willing to keep the door cracked and allow it to open even more, they can accentuate and bring in more and more of their soul experience into their own physical bodies. There's probably many other ways. That happens to be the one that I have seen and am really just, I have no words for how powerful it is when I see somebody's potential really unleashed when they step into working with their own, opening the door to their own soul.
Beautiful. One of the things that I like to think about is our biology, because I am a psychiatrist. And I think it's important to understand that our biology is such that when we are in that experience of love, caretaking, nurturing, that our biology is designed to reward us.
Mhm.
So when we step out of ourselves to help somebody else, or when we take really good care of ourselves, that is intrinsically rewarding
Mhm.
because of our biology.
Mhm. Well, being a doctor, you would definitely have a much better grasp on the biological, mechanisms that are facilitating our human experience. I do believe that there is an element of our soul that has the power to kind of evolve our biology to the place to where we are living that what you just described consistently. And I use the example that I read about with Anita Morjani, who was an NDE who had, I think, stage 4 cancer. She was on the brink of transitioning permanently, and she had a miraculous spontaneous remission after an NDE. And she puts it best of anybody that I have ever heard describe it, that through her NDE, she realized that as she had lived her human life up to that point, she had lived it with a limiting belief of her power to both live completely from her soul, as well as her power to self-heal. And that a lot of her limiting of her power was a result of fear, the fears that she had accumulated over the course of her lifetime. And her NDE showed her that she did not need to have fear and that she had the power. And in the story, if I remember correctly, she talks about choosing to believe that she had that power in her physical body. And as a result, she had spontaneous remission. And it essentially brought her back into a state of health that she was nowhere near, leading up to that point. And so I think that's a really beautiful, she does a beautiful job of explaining something that's very difficult to talk about when we think about how is it that our biology can change miraculously, spontaneously, but it has the ability, and there's enough stories out there to make those changes when we understand that we can make those changes.
Well, I think, scientists, we tend to focus on disease. But I think it is very clear that excess fear causes disease. I don't think we have scientific studies showing the opposite. We have some, right, on the power of belief, the power of optimism, power of connection. We certainly have some, but we have plenty to say that fear will damage your health, and living in chronic fear will have even more damage to your health. So I think one point that you and I can absolutely agree on is that liberating yourself, whatever self that is, human body, soul, whatever, but liberating yourself from excess fear is definitely a pathway that's necessary to live your most satisfying life. And then I think we can also agree that optimism and hope help guide us in a more powerful way that ultimately will be more rewarding for our human experience, our soul experience. So I do like to believe that there's a lot of power in our thoughts, and we also have a lot of power to change them. I also worry, though, that people listening will blame themselves for illness, for cancer, for death. And I think we want to be cautious that people who are already suffering with disease don't layer on a layer of suffering that they have either caused this or they've somehow failed to cure this. Because we do know that every human body is going to transition. If we believe in a soul and something that goes on for longer, that's one thing. But I think we're all very clear that human bodies are only here for a period of time. And the way that most of them transition is through illness. So I do think it's important that people don't feel that they have burdened themselves with an illness. That's just my philosophy.
Yeah, I wouldn't condone injecting that type of fear into anybody's thought process about their current state, because the situation that we are all in, be it miraculous, challenging, glorious, or painful, is a result of the life that we are in the moment. And that is not I would never condone a philosophy that anybody is actively choosing their suffering or actively causing their own suffering. I think that is a challenging statement. And I think introducing that idea just injects more fear that ultimately, you know, these stories and experiences are, you know, to some degree, I have outside of my NDE, just my own personal kind of analysis of it. It seems to me that, you know, we have more access to hearing people's stories like this. Maybe not necessarily that people are having them at a greater rate, but we just have greater access to hearing them. And as a result, that is also helping us collectively shift our understanding about who we are. And through that tool will help us aid in our collective healing. In the end of the day, I think part of it is about how we identify with ourselves. So if we were to use the analogy of the vehicle again, if I were to get into my car today, I wouldn't identify as the car. I still identify as me in a car. And I think what happens is when we have our souls get into this vehicle of a physical body, because the physical body is on autopilot, it doesn't realize the soul is in the driver's seat, then we begin to identify with the physical body, the car. We don't identify with the soul. So when we begin to identify with the soul and have an understanding that the soul is infinitely wonderful, glorious, beautiful, loving, powerful, healing, when we identify with that, that's when the vehicle begins to understand that the soul's in the driver's seat, and all of that miraculous capability, the power of who we are, begins to be experienced directly in the physical body.
That sounds beautiful. And certainly helping our listeners to live a more satisfying life for whatever period they're here as a human, but to shift the paradigm from, if you want to be very simplistic, from a fear-based living to a love-based living. And my belief is that we are designed to enjoy that more than the fear-based living, that the fear-based living is something we need at moments to help us stay alive, but we've gotten stuck in that. And that, I believe, is what's causing a lot of suffering right now. And that if we could shift back either through your paradigm or my paradigm or anybody's paradigm to a sense of wonder, awe, connection, love, miraculous potential, abundance, there's so many different words, that we could all live a much more satisfying life. I really appreciate you sharing with us such personal experiences. And I see the passion in you. It's very beautiful. That is transforming to be around you. It's quite inspiring. And I wish you all the best on your continued journey.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to spend this time with you.